Hello, welcome to the Video Voters Guide. My name is Amy. I'm a volunteer with the League of Women Voters, and we're here today interviewing candidates for Secretary of State. This is Dennis Richardson. We're going to be asking him just a few questions so you as a voter can be more informed. So let's start with your background. What led you to run for this office?
As far as background is concerned, I was a helicopter pilot in Vietnam 45 years ago, and I feel like I've been in training for 45 years to become Secretary of State, although I didn't realize it. I remember when I was in Vietnam, I had an opportunity to be flying a group of Vietnamese village people in for questioning, and when you were flying, if you were to land in a normal way, you'd find out that you're really vulnerable at the very end because you're low and slow. And so I was doing a high overhead approach with these 12 people in the back, and they've never even ridden a bicycle. And so as I came down, which is kind of like a corkscrew approach, I'm paying attention to landing, and they're screaming. Their idea of physics is if you put water in a bucket, it will pour. And so what we did, I finally landed, and they jumped off, and I realized that I had just caused them to be terrorized, and it taught me something, that it's one thing to have authority, but it's another thing to have responsibility. And so in government, I feel it's the same way. We have too many people that have authority, but they don't take responsibility for the consequences of their actions. So I've served in the legislature for 12 years. I have learned what's involved with the budget. I understand, as I was co-chair of Ways and Means and helped craft the budget. Two Democrats and myself worked a $60 billion budget for the state that worked. I've learned that the people often don't get the service that they really need. And so I'm running for Secretary of State so that I can help Oregonians to have a better life by having money not be wasted, but focused on solving the problems where it's needed most, in education and in providing a proper functioning, healthy and safe place for our foster children, and in doing the things that are going to help our economy be better.
Okay, thank you. So what about ensuring campaign contribution transparency as the Secretary of State? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Campaign contributions is an issue that needs to be resolved because there's just too much control and too much effect of money in campaigns. The Secretary of State's position is not a policy-making position, but it's one where you function and you administer the laws that you're given by the legislature and by the governor. And so as the director of campaigns and over elections, I will ensure that the policymakers are aware of where the money is coming from, what can be done to help it have less influence. We have a problem right now with, in 2014 cycle for campaigns, over $13 million of unaccounted for money was just listed as miscellaneous cash contributions. We don't know where the money came from or whether it was properly being classified. We need to ensure that all money that comes into campaigns in Oregon is accounted for so that we know who the donors are and what the source of the funds are.
Okay, thanks. So the Secretary of State is also a member of the State Land Board. Can you explain what kinds of decisions this board makes and how they impact Oregonians?
Yes, the Secretary of State, the Treasurer, and the Governor are the three members of the Land Board, and they're responsible to oversee and manage the natural resources of the state. And they haven't been doing a very good job. The Constitution talks about Oregon lands being to be productive and well managed and help provide resources for our schools. But instead, they've actually been essentially ignored. They're costing over $1 million in expenses just to maintain them every year. And there needs to be a better program so that we don't just sit by and watch our forests burn up, putting tons of carbon into the atmosphere and killing wildlife when it's a resource that should be properly managed and maintained for the benefits of all Oregonians, but done in a way that it also produces a reasonable amount of income for our schools.
Thank you. In your opinion, what are some of the most difficult decisions that this office will have to make?
That's a challenge because I'm running for the office and I haven't been there. And politicians often have all these solutions when they really don't know exactly what's involved.
What do you imagine might be controversial?
I think the proper use of the audit capacity is very important. I feel that over the past decades, there's been too much use of the power of the Secretary of State's office to protect party and not protect the people. I mean, we've lost $1.5 billion in failed programs just in the last 5 or 6 years. I mean, the corruption that appears to exist in the Department of Energy, where we had almost $1 billion of tax credits that were given to individuals and companies, and that money didn't come into our coffers. We need to have a Secretary of State who will use the auditing capacity to help ensure that the people's money is well spent. And so what I will do is refocus the auditing capacity to help ensure that our school districts are functioning appropriately, that the Department of Human Services is providing safe as well as financially appropriate expenditures to help our foster kids. We need to ensure that the Department of Energy and Quality, the Department of Environmental Quality is functioning as it should, because we have Portland residents that are finding out that the air is polluted, the grounds that their kids are playing on are polluted, that there's higher incidences of cancer because the DEQ was not paying attention to business, and the Secretary of State's audit department should have been aware of that and finding out so that we could have rectified the problem years ago.
So we have just a couple last minutes. Are there any other issues or points that you'd like to make?
I think that there are those that want to be a Secretary of State that are looking to have an investigative capacity. And I think that we need to remember the Secretary of State is controlled by the Constitution, and political campaign promises that violate the Constitution are not appropriate. The Secretary of State's office should be a bright spot for our economy. If the office is functioning appropriately, they'll be rolling out the red carpet to help businesses that understand our environmental principles. We want them to come to Oregon and to flourish here and create jobs for Oregon workers. We need to remove some of the red tape that is impeding businesses from being able to grow, because that creates jobs, and jobs create wealth. I mean, we don't need higher taxes, we need more taxpayers in good paying jobs. And so I believe the Secretary of State's office can be utilized in a way that's positive, that gets the job done, that lessens the waste and the abuse of power that has been so prevalent for far too long.
Well, excellent. Thank you so much, Dennis. Again, this is the Video Voters Guide. My name is Amy. I'm a volunteer with the League of Women Voters. Remember, the Oregon primary is on May 17th, and the last day to register to vote for the state is April 26th. Thank you.
That's
all right.